I thought my aunt was my best friend until I found out she sabotaged my job to protect her son, and my Aunt Valerie was more than just family. She was my safe haven. My parents were great, don't get me wrong, but they were traditional and pretty strict. Valerie was the one who let me breathe. She had this easy way about her, always knowing when to push me and when to just listen. When I was struggling with college applications, she was the one who stayed up with me, going over essays and hyping me up like I was destined to be president or something. She made me feel like I could do anything. So when I finally landed my dream job, she was the first person I called after my parents. It was a marketing position at a rising tech company, a role I'd worked my ass off for through internships, late nights, and networking events I barely survived. Valerie screamed on the phone like I'd won the lottery. "You did it, Jason. I knew you would. They'd be insane not to hire you." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I couldn't wait to celebrate with her. She even offered to help me pick out some new suits for the office. "You need to look like the boss you're about to become," she said with a laugh. Valerie was that kind of aunt. The cool one who always knew what to say to make you feel invincible. And her son, Lucas, was my cousin/best friend growing up. We drifted a bit in college since he went the engineering route while I was deep in the business world, but we still kept in touch. Lucas was more reserved than his mom. Quiet, thoughtful, a little awkward. The kind of guy you root for. Valerie talked about him constantly, always mentioning how hard he was working on his career. When I started the job, things were great. My boss, Samantha, was tough but fair, and my team seemed like a solid group. I felt like I was finally stepping into my potential, and it was exhilarating. Valerie checked in constantly, asking how things were going, if I was making connections, and if I needed anything. But then, weird stuff started happening. At first, it was little mistakes. A typo in a client presentation here, a missed email there. I brushed it off as rookie jitters, trying to adjust to the pace of a fast-moving workplace. But then Samantha called me into her office. "Jason," she began, looking at me over her glasses. "You've got potential, but you're slipping. Your last 2 projects had significant errors, and clients are noticing. What's going on?" I felt my stomach drop. Errors? I checked my work obsessively. I knew those projects inside and out. I promised her I'd tighten things up, but the conversation left me rattled. I didn't tell Valerie about it. I didn't want her to worry or, worse, pity me. The mistakes kept piling up. One time, I found a document on my desk with completely incorrect figures, numbers I'd never input. Another time, an important email thread with a client disappeared from my inbox entirely, only to reappear later with a strange note attached that I didn't write. It felt like I was losing control of everything. Emily, one of my colleagues, noticed my stress. "You okay?" she asked one day while we were grabbing coffee in the break room. "I'm fine, just, I don't know. Feels like I can't get my footing." She nodded sympathetically. "It happens. Sometimes people get competitive, you know? It's not always fair." I laughed it off, but her words stuck with me. Competitive? I couldn't imagine anyone on my team going out of their way to sabotage me. We were all just trying to do our jobs, right? Things at work weren't the only source of tension. Lucas started calling me more often, which I loved, but his updates were, well, kind of a lot. He'd landed an entry-level job at a big engineering firm, and suddenly he was talking about promotions, accolades, and projects like he was the golden boy of the industry. I was happy for him. I really was, but it was hard not to compare. Here I was, floundering in a job I thought I'd kill at, while Lucas seemed to be thriving. Valerie, of course, was thrilled for him. "He's really coming into his own, don't you think?" she said during one of our catch-up calls. "I'm so proud of both of you." I didn't mention my struggles. What was the point? Valerie saw me as the kid who always landed on his feet, the one who didn't need hand-holding anymore. I didn't want to shatter that image. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, I grabbed drinks with my best friend, Noah. I vented about everything. How I felt like I was being set up to fail, how Lucas's sudden success was messing with my head, and how I didn't know who to trust at work. Noah furrowed his brow. "Dude, that sounds weird. Like, are you sure it's not someone at your job trying to screw you over?" "I don't know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "It doesn't make sense. Who'd have it out for me?" I haven't even been there long enough to piss anyone off. He shrugged. Maybe it's not about you. His words gave me pause, but I didn't know what to do with them. At the time, it felt like just another layer of paranoia I didn't need. Still, the thought stuck with me as I went home that night, staring at the ceiling and wondering where I'd gone wrong. Little did I know, the cracks in my perfect life were just the beginning. If I thought things couldn't get any worse after that meeting with Samantha, I was sorely mistaken. Over the next couple of weeks, it felt like I was walking through a minefield at work. More mistakes cropped up, things I couldn't explain, let alone fix. One of my reports was inexplicably flagged for plagiarism, which made no sense since I'd written it myself. Samantha called me in again, her expression stern. Jason, I've been in this industry a long time, and I know when someone is struggling versus when they're careless. You're better than this, but my hands are tied if this keeps happening. I wanted to scream that I wasn't being careless, that something was going on, but what evidence did I have? All I could do was nod and promise to be more diligent. Walking out of her office, I felt humiliated and frustrated beyond belief. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep this up. Around that time, Lucas started calling me even more. He'd always been kind of shy, but now he was full of stories about the amazing projects he was working on and how his boss had already hinted at a promotion. I was happy for him. At least, I tried to be, but something about the timing felt off. Maybe it was just my own bitterness talking, but it seemed like Lucas was always shining brightest when I was barely treading water. One evening, I vented about it to Noah while we shot hoops at the park. Noah had this way of listening without interrupting, but I could tell he was holding something back. Okay, he said finally, tossing the ball back to me. I wasn't going to say anything, but Lucas sounds kind of sketchy. Sketchy? I laughed, trying to brush it off. He's not sketchy. He's just lucky, I guess. Lucky? Dude, he suddenly skyrockets at his job while you're randomly getting screwed at yours? That's a hell of a coincidence. I paused, the ball in my hands. You think he has something to do with what's happening to me? Noah shrugged. I'm just saying it's weird timing. Don't rule it out. It was a crazy idea, or at least, that's what I told myself. Lucas was my cousin, my childhood buddy. He wouldn't sabotage me, right? Still, the thought lingered in the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. The turning point came when Emily, my colleague, pulled me aside during a lunch break. Emily and I weren't exactly close, but we'd always gotten along. She hesitated for a moment, glancing around the break room like she was about to share a state secret. Jason, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I overheard something. Okay, I said slowly, setting my sandwich down. Yesterday, during a meeting with Samantha, she mentioned Lucas's name. That got my attention. Lucas? My cousin Lucas? Emily nodded. I didn't catch the full context, but she said something about being impressed with him. I thought you should know. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Why would Samantha even know Lucas? He wasn't in marketing, and as far as I knew, our jobs had no overlap. But the idea of my boss talking about him, praising him, even, made my stomach churn. I thanked Emily and tried to act normal for the rest of the day, but my mind was spinning. That night, I decided to do some digging. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, exactly, but I needed answers. I pulled up Lucas's LinkedIn profile and scrolled through his recent posts. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first, just the usual updates about new projects and accomplishments. But then I saw a post from a month ago that stopped me cold. Excited to announce my collaboration with a leading marketing firm on an exciting new project. Big things ahead. A leading marketing firm. Could it be my company? My pulse quickened as I searched for more clues. It didn't take long to find another post, this one tagged with a hashtag that included my company's name. My jaw clenched. Why hadn't Lucas mentioned this to me? And why had he been working with my company while my career was crumbling? I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept jumping to conclusions I didn't want to believe. Was Lucas involved in my work troubles? Was Valerie? No, that was impossible. She loved me like her own son. She wouldn't do something like that, would she? The next day, I confided in Noah again. We met at our usual diner, the kind of place with sticky tables and bottomless coffee. Noah listened intently as I laid everything out. the LinkedIn posts, Emily's comment, and my growing suspicion that Lucas was somehow connected to my troubles. I don't know, man, I said, running a hand through my hair. I feel like I'm going crazy. There's no way Lucas would screw me over. He's my cousin. Noah frowned. Maybe it's not Lucas. Maybe it's someone else pulling the strings. Like who? Valerie. I froze, my coffee halfway to my lips. Valerie? No. She'd never. Think about it, Noah interrupted. She's always been Lucas's biggest cheerleader, right? What if she saw this as a chance to give him a leg up? Maybe she didn't mean to hurt you, but I shook my head, rejecting the idea immediately. No, Valerie wouldn't do that. She's the one person I trust completely. Are you sure? The question hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to say yes, to defend her, but a tiny seed of doubt had already taken root. Valerie had always been fiercely protective of Lucas, sometimes to the point of being overbearing. And she'd always been involved in my life, offering advice and guidance. Could she have crossed a line without realizing it? That weekend, I visited my parents for dinner. They were thrilled to see me, as always, and eager to hear about my new job. I gave them a watered-down version of events, leaving out the sabotage and my suspicions. My mom, however, noticed my hesitation. "Jason, is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just adjusting to the new role." "Well, if you need advice, you know you can always talk to Valerie," she said. "She's always been so proud of you." The mention of Valerie made my chest tighten. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside, I felt like I was cracking under the weight of my doubts. After dinner, I called Noah again. "I need to figure this out," I told him. "I can't just sit here and wonder." "Then let's find out," he said simply. "If someone's messing with you, we'll get proof." Over the next few days, Noah and I started piecing together what little evidence we had. I pulled up old emails, scoured my company's internal systems, and even tried to subtly question my colleagues. It wasn't much, but I was determined to get to the bottom of it. One night, as I was going through my emails yet again, something clicked. A forwarded email from weeks ago had Valerie's personal email address on it. I hadn't noticed it at the time, but now it stood out like a neon sign. Why was Valerie in the loop on a project for my job? And more importantly, why hadn't she mentioned it to me? I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to fit together. Valerie, the woman I trusted more than anyone, might be behind everything. But why? And how could I prove it? As I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, I realized I was standing at the edge of a cliff. If I dug any deeper, there'd be no going back. For the next few days, I was a man on a mission. The forwarded email with Valerie's address had been like a crack in a dam, and now I couldn't stop myself from looking for more. Every little interaction, every conversation I'd had with her over the last few months, replayed in my head. I didn't want to believe she'd betray me, but the signs were becoming harder to ignore. I decided to confront her, indirectly, at least. One night, I called her under the guise of catching up. "Hey, Aunt Val," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just wanted to say hi. It feels like we haven't talked in a bit." "Oh, Jason. Sweetheart. I was just thinking about you. How's the new job going? Still killing it?" Her words felt like daggers, and I had to take a deep breath to keep my composure. "It's fine. A little stressful, though. You know how it is." "Oh, I'm sure you'll find your groove soon," she said breezily. "You've always been so sharp, Jason. They're lucky to have you." It was the perfect line, the kind of encouragement I'd always adored her for. But now, it felt hollow. I decided to test the waters. "Actually, it's been kind of weird lately. Feels like someone's got it out for me at work. Emails going missing, reports getting messed up. Stuff like that." There was a pause, just a second too long. "Oh no," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "That sounds awful. Are you sure it's not just, a rough patch? Everyone has those." "Maybe," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But it's hard to shake the feeling that it's deliberate. Weird, right?" Another pause. "Weird," she echoed, her tone a little too forced. "But I'm sure it's nothing, Jason. Don't stress yourself out over it. The conversation moved on after that, but I couldn't stop replaying her reactions in my head. Something about her tone wasn't right. Valerie had always been quick to jump to my defense. Why was she brushing this off so easily? It was subtle, but it gnawed at me. A few days later, Noah called with an update. Okay, so I did some digging on my end. You're not gonna like this. What is it? I asked, bracing myself. Remember how you said Valerie's email was on that forwarded thread? Well, I looked up the IP address tied to some of the anonymous edits on your shared project files. Guess what? My stomach dropped. What? They match her general location. I can't say for sure it's her, but yeah, I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Are you serious? I wouldn't joke about this, Noah said grimly. Look, I know this sucks, but you need to be smart about how you handle it. If Valerie's involved, you can't just go in guns blazing. You need proof. Proof. Right. But how do you gather proof against someone you love, someone you've trusted your whole life? The thought of spying on Valerie made me sick, but I knew Noah was right. Without evidence, confronting her would only backfire. The next time I saw Valerie in person was at a family dinner. She greeted me with her usual warmth, pulling me into a tight hug and asking about my job. It was surreal, sitting across from her and pretending everything was normal. I couldn't shake the image of her tampering with my work, using her connections to pull strings behind the scenes. Lucas was there too, and he seemed unusually cheerful. He kept talking about a big opportunity he'd recently secured, a collaboration with a marketing firm that was giving him a lot of visibility. It was hard to listen without feeling a wave of anger. Was it my company? Had Valerie orchestrated this whole thing to boost him at my expense? Congrats, man, I said, forcing a smile. Sounds like you're killing it. Thanks, Lucas said, his grin widening. Honestly, I couldn't have done it without Mom. She's been amazing. I glanced at Valerie, who was beaming with pride. The pieces were clicking into place, but I still didn't have the full picture. If Valerie had been pulling strings, how far had she gone? And how much had Lucas known? Back at work, things continued to spiral. Samantha's patience was wearing thin, and Emily confided in me that some of the team had started whispering about my incompetence. It was humiliating. I was desperate to prove myself, but every time I tried to get ahead, something, or someone, dragged me back down. One evening, while working late, I received an anonymous message on my work chat. The sender's username was a random string of numbers, and the message simply said, "You're being set up. Check the server logs from last month." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Who sent this? Was it a joke? Or was it someone trying to help? I decided to take the risk and follow the lead. It took hours of digging, but eventually, I found it. A record of unusual activity on my account from a remote IP address. The timestamps matched the periods when the biggest errors had occurred. I cross-referenced the IP with public data and nearly dropped my laptop when I saw the results. It was connected to an address I recognized, Valerie's home. The anonymous message wasn't lying. Valerie was behind it. I didn't know what to do with the information. My first instinct was to confront her, but Noah talked me down. Not yet, he said. You need to figure out why she's doing this. What's her motive? If you go at her now, she'll just deny everything. He was right, as usual. If I wanted the truth, I needed to approach this carefully. I decided to reach out to Lucas instead. Maybe he could shed some light on what was going on without realizing it. Hey man, I said, calling him one afternoon. Just wanted to catch up. How's the new project going? Lucas launched into an enthusiastic description of his work, but I steered the conversation toward our family. Mom's been great, he said eventually. She's always looking out for me, you know? Yeah, she's the best, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Hey, did she help you with that marketing collaboration you mentioned? There was a pause. Yeah, kind of. She's got connections, you know? She's always been good at networking. I clenched my jaw. That's awesome. Guess I should have hit her up for advice before starting my new job. Lucas laughed awkwardly. Yeah, maybe. His hesitation said it all. He knew more than he was letting on. Whether he was complicit or just going along with Valerie's plans, I couldn't tell. But one thing was clear. I wasn't imagining things. Valerie had interfered in my life, and Lucas was benefiting from it. That night, I barely slept. The betrayal felt suffocating, like a weight on my chest I couldn't shake. Valerie wasn't just meddling. She was actively sabotaging me. The aunt who had always been my biggest supporter was now my biggest threat. I didn't know how far she'd gone or why she was doing this, but I was determined to find out. Whatever her reasons, one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent days grappling with the enormity of what I'd uncovered. Valerie, my rock, my mentor, she'd orchestrated my downfall. Every instinct told me to confront her immediately, to demand answers. But I knew I needed to keep my emotions in check. If I went in blind, she'd find a way to gaslight me, to make me doubt what I'd found. I needed more evidence. Something irrefutable. So, I dug deeper. With Noah's help, I uncovered a few more breadcrumbs. It turned out that the collaboration Lucas had been bragging about was, in fact, with my company. Not only that, but the emails that had gone missing during my projects, they'd been forwarded to an outside address, Valerie's. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. Still, the why eluded me. Valerie had always been supportive of my career. So what had changed? Why now? The only answer that made sense was Lucas. She'd always been fiercely protective of him, maybe even to a fault. But had she really torched my career just to help him succeed? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My anger wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the manipulation. Valerie had been playing me, pretending to cheer me on while pulling the rug out from under me. It was cruel, calculated. The next family dinner was my breaking point. We were gathered at my parents' house, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Valerie was her usual bubbly self, laughing and joking with everyone. Lucas was there too, looking smugger than usual, and I could barely contain my frustration. Every time Valerie looked at me with that warm, familiar smile, I felt like I was going to explode. Finally, after dinner, I pulled her aside. We were standing in the backyard, the cool evening air prickling my skin. I didn't even try to hide the edge in my voice. "We need to talk," I said. She tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I know what you've been doing, Valerie. I know about the emails, the sabotage, everything." For a split second, her mask slipped, her eyes widened, and I caught a flash of panic before she quickly composed herself. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice calm but tight. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I found the forwarded emails, the IP addresses. It all leads back to you. You've been working behind the scenes to mess with my job, and for what? To help Lucas?" Her face hardened. "Jason, you're being ridiculous. Why would I ever do something like that to you? I love you." "Don't," I said, shaking my head. "Don't play that card. I trusted you, Valerie. You were the one person I thought would always have my back. And now I find out you've been sabotaging me for months? Why?" Her expression shifted, the warmth draining from her face. For the first time, she didn't look like the Anne I'd known all my life. She looked cold. "Because you didn't need it," she said quietly. I stared at her, stunned. "What?" "You've always been the golden boy, Jason," she said, her voice growing sharper. "Everything comes so easily for you. You're smart, charming, successful. You don't know what it's like to struggle." "That's not true." "Oh, please," she interrupted. "Lucas has always been in your shadow. He's brilliant, but he doesn't have your confidence, your connections. He's been overlooked his whole life, and I wasn't going to let that happen anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you decided to destroy my career instead? How is that fair?" "Fair," she scoffed. "Life isn't fair, Jason. I did what I had to do to give my son a fighting chance. You'll bounce back. You always do. But Lucas? He needed this more than you." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "You talk about giving Lucas a chance, but what about me? Do you even care how much damage you've done?" Her gaze softened slightly, but it wasn't the kind of softness that came from regret. It was pity. "I do care, Jason, but you're strong. You'll get through this. And one day, you'll understand why I did what I did. No, I won't, I said firmly. Because what you did is unforgivable. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Jason, she said, almost pleading, please don't tell anyone. Lucas doesn't know about any of this. If you expose me, it'll destroy him. I spun around, fury boiling over. You should have thought about that before you sabotaged me. You don't get to ask for my silence now. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I couldn't believe the audacity of her justification, that I didn't need my career as much as Lucas did, as if my hard work and ambition were less valid because I'd been successful before. When I got home, I called Noah and unloaded everything. He listened quietly, letting me vent before chiming in. So, what are you gonna do? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. I could go to my boss, show her the evidence, but that would blow up everything. Valerie, Lucas, my family. It would never be the same. Do you really care about keeping the peace after what she did? I sighed. It's not just about her. If I take her down, Lucas gets caught in the crossfire. And as much as I hate what's happening, I don't think he deserves that. You're a better person than I am, Noah muttered. If it were me, I'd burn it all down. I laughed bitterly. Trust me, I'm tempted. Over the next few days, I wrestled with my decision. Part of me wanted to march into Samantha's office with the evidence and clear my name. But another part of me hesitated. If I exposed Valerie, the fallout would be catastrophic. My parents would be devastated, and Lucas, whether he knew about Valerie's schemes or not, would have his life turned upside down. In the end, I decided to confront Lucas. If he was innocent, he deserved to know the truth. And if he wasn't, well, I needed to hear it from him. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe. Lucas seemed genuinely happy to see me, which made what I was about to say even harder. Lucas, I began, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Sure, he said, looking puzzled. What's up? I hesitated, then dove in. How much do you know about Mom's involvement with my company? His face went pale. What do you mean? I mean the emails, the sabotage, the string she's been pulling to help you. Did you know? Lucas looked genuinely horrified. Jason, I swear, I didn't know anything about that. Mom mentioned she had some connections, but I didn't ask for details. I thought she was just networking. I studied his face, looking for any sign of deceit, but all I saw was confusion and guilt. I believe you, I said finally. But Lucas, you need to understand. What she did hurt me. Badly. And I don't know if I can forgive her. He nodded slowly, his expression heavy. I get it. And I'm sorry, Jason. I had no idea. His sincerity was a relief, but it didn't erase the damage. Valerie's betrayal had fractured something fundamental in our family, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. By the time I left the cafe, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Valerie get away with this. Whether Lucas knew or not, she needed to face the consequences of her actions. But how I handled it would define the fallout for everyone involved. The question was, could I hold her accountable without destroying my family in the process? After my conversation with Lucas, I spent the next few days in a fog. The pieces were all there. Valerie's betrayal, Lucas's oblivious complicity, and my dwindling reputation at work. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had to act. Valerie had crossed a line, and if I let it slide, she'd only keep pushing the boundaries. But the thought of destroying my family weighed heavily on me. Lucas texted me the day after our coffee meeting. Lucas **K. Mom told me she wanted to talk to you. She's been acting weird since you guys spoke. Did something happen? I didn't respond right away. What was I supposed to say? I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Instead, I just replied. It's complicated. I'll explain soon, I decided to take the weekend to figure out my next move. Mia, a girl I'd recently started seeing, noticed my mood when we met up for dinner that Saturday night. You've been staring at your food for 10 minutes, she said, nudging me gently. What's going on? I debated whether to tell her. Mia and I weren't exactly serious yet, but she had this way of listening that made you feel like you weren't being judged. Finally, I gave her a condensed version of the story, leaving out the names and some of the more incriminating details. "That's intense," she said after I finished. "But if someone hurt you that badly, why are you hesitating to confront them?" "Because it's not that simple," I said, sighing. "If I call them out, it'll ripple through my entire family. And part of me thinks I should just move on and focus on fixing things at work." Mia tilted her head, studying me. "Let me ask you this. If the roles were reversed, do you think they'd hesitate to throw you under the bus?" Her words stung, but she wasn't wrong. Valerie had shown no hesitation when it came to protecting Lucas, even at my expense. Why was I still trying to spare her feelings? The following Monday, I walked into work with a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't sure what the long-term plan was, but I knew I needed to start by repairing my reputation. Samantha's patience with me was thin, but I still had a chance to prove myself. I threw myself into my tasks, triple-checking every email, every report, every project. Emily noticed the change in my attitude. "Hey," she said during a coffee break. "You seem better. Did something happen?" "Not yet," I said cryptically, "but I'm working on it." With Noah's help, I compiled everything I'd uncovered: emails, server logs, even a timeline of the strange incidents that had derailed my work. It was meticulous, and it left no room for doubt. When I was ready, I scheduled a meeting with Samantha. Samantha was quiet as I laid out the evidence in her office. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock, and finally, to a grim sort of understanding. "Jason," she said after a long pause, "this is a lot. And if what you're saying is true, it's a serious breach of ethics." "It is true," I said firmly. "I don't know how much of it Lucas was aware of, but Valerie orchestrated the whole thing. I just want my name cleared." She nodded slowly. "I'll have to bring this to HR. If they verify your claims, there will be consequences, not just for her, but for anyone involved." I left the meeting feeling lighter, though a small part of me still worried about the fallout. I'd taken the first step toward reclaiming my career, but the family drama was far from over. That evening, Valerie called me. I debated whether to answer, but my curiosity won out. "Jason," she began, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, my tone cold. "Because I think we've said everything that needs to be said." "Please," she said, almost pleading. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But can we meet in person? Just to talk?" I hesitated. The thought of sitting across from her made my skin crawl, but part of me wanted to hear her out. Maybe it was closure I needed, or maybe I just wanted to see if she'd admit to everything. "Fine," I said eventually. "Tomorrow. My place." When Valerie arrived the next evening, she looked different. The confident, polished woman I'd always known seemed smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched and her eyes tired. She sat on my couch, wringing her hands nervously. "I know I can't take back what I did," she began, her voice trembling. "And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to understand why I did it." "I already know why," I said flatly. "You thought Lucas deserved more than me, so you decided to sabotage my life to make it happen." "It wasn't about you not deserving it," she said quickly. "It was about Lucas needing it. You've always been strong, Jason. You've always had this light about you. But Lucas, he's struggled his whole life. He doesn't have your confidence or your charisma. I was just trying to level the playing field." "Level the playing field?" I repeated, my voice rising. "By destroying my career? By making me look incompetent?" "You didn't level the field, Valerie. You tilted it so far in Lucas's favor that I almost lost everything." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said softly. I thought I could help him without hurting you." "Well, you were wrong," I snapped. "And now you're going to have to live with the consequences." Her head shot up, alarm flashing in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've already taken this to my boss. HR is investigating everything. If they find enough to take legal action, that's on you." For a moment, she looked like she was about to argue, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I deserve that," she said quietly. "I won't fight it. But please, Jason, don't let this destroy our family. Don't let it ruin Lucas." Lucas doesn't need me to ruin him, I said, standing up. If he was part of this, he'll ruin himself. And if he wasn't, then he'll finally know the truth about you. The fallout was swift. HR verified my evidence and escalated the matter to upper management. Valerie's professional connections to the company were severed, and her reputation in her field took a serious hit. Lucas, to his credit, distanced himself from her once he learned the full story. He apologized to me again, though the damage to our relationship wasn't something that could be repaired overnight. As for me, Samantha gave me a second chance. I poured everything into rebuilding my reputation, and eventually, I regained her trust. The road back wasn't easy, but I was stronger for it. Valerie tried reaching out a few more times, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Maybe one day I'd be ready to talk, but for now, I needed space. Trust, once broken, isn't easily mended. In the end, I learned a painful but valuable lesson. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. But even in betrayal, there's an opportunity for growth, and I wasn't going to let Valerie's actions define me. I was ready to move forward, scars and all.